Okay, so good morning again. We continue our lectures, okay, on discourse. As I told you last time, we introduced systemic, functional, okay, linguistics and register. And because I saw that the section dealing with classroom discourse is so small, and since you are going to be living, inshallah, in most of your time in a classroom setting, so it would be much better to focus more on classroom, okay, discourse, which is very rich area. Unfortunately, in most of teacher training programs, they don't focus on this area, classroom discourse. Okay, they don't focus on this area. There are two things about this area. There's the discourse itself, okay, and the language of the teacher. Okay, the language of the teacher. What kind of language, questions that the teacher can use, you know, and educate the student teachers about this area. Okay. So the outline for today's lecture is as follows. Questions, okay, questions related to why classroom discourse is important for ELT, okay, is important for ELT, and then next one is challenges. So we'll have three questions there. We will ask them, okay, and we'll try to provide, as a beginning, you know, to know how a classroom discourse is so important for education in general, okay, not only in ELT, right? It's the teaching in general, teaching subjects or language. So next point would be challenges for teachers and learners, on the basis of which we try to explore the directions provided in the literature for future developments. And then we will go and have a look after introducing these issues related to the rationale, to the importance, to the reasons why classroom discourse is important for education and ELT in particular. We move on and to start to explore these characteristics, the features of classroom discourse. We will focus here on the following points. We will talk about how classroom discourse serves this main purpose, okay, of a teacher, which is the control of the interaction. Because we know that teachers, most of the time in the classroom, they are the controllers of the interaction, right? Very, very rarely you can see students taking initiative, okay? Next point is speech modification. We will try to see the ways how teachers modify their language. And you remember when we were dealing with peer teaching, we were talking about this aspect that many of you need to reconsider their language, to simplify it. Okay? And there are ways how we can simplify that. So we'll introduce that in here. And here, let me go back to one very term used in first language acquisition, when children are acquiring the language and the parents are interacting with their children. They use a very specific kind of discourse that is referred to in the relevant literature as foreigner talk. Are you familiar with this term, foreigner talk? It's the kind of language so much simplified that we use with babies, and then when they are growing, that kind of language is referred to as foreigner talk, right? So the same thing for the teachers, okay, because the students are learning the language, okay, so they needs to simplify that. You need to use a simplified version of English, right, since we are talking about focus on ELT. And then we will talk about another aspect related to discourse of classroom, which is the elicitation techniques, okay, because you know that one of the main roles of a teacher in a classroom is to elicit, okay, information from the students rather than just lecture, okay, give information. It's part of his job, but better to focus on this new pedagogy of eliciting information and things from the students, Okay, because we need to make the student the central point of our teaching, rather than the teacher as a central point, right? Next, we will talk about the structure of this classroom discourse. And in here, we're going to talk about this very famous structure about classroom, which is referred to as IRF, okay, exchange structure, which is initiation, response, feedback. Some say initiation, response, evaluation, since the feedback of the teacher is usually an evaluation, okay? So it was introduced by Sinclair and Coulthard in this way, and then it was, others prefer to refer to it as IRE. Okay, and finally, we will try to explore a little bit another area of classroom discourse, which is referred to as repair. And repair simply refers to those contexts that Hafidi Ahlam is going to explore, which is that of error analysis, okay, in writing maybe, but also in oral, okay, when there is initiation, response, feedback, etc. There are errors that the students do. So we'll try to explore this area, how the teachers, the techniques, the different techniques, how the teachers can do what is referred to as repair. It's related to giving feedback, correcting students' errors, and so on and forth, okay? So this is the general outline of this lecture. And now we move on into the first one, which is questions related to why classroom discourse is important for ELT. Okay? Now there are three questions. Well, you can have more, but three are the major ones. So question one, by the way, it's based on a book that I already referred to in my post on Facebook. It's called, okay, let me show you the title. This is the book, Exploring Classroom Discourse, Language in Action by Steve Wallach. Okay? So this is, you can buy it online. Now, next point. Why is communication in the classroom setting so important? And then the next question that can be asked is, in what ways can teachers make effective use of their language? So, because we are going to see how it is important, so of course, it's important for classroom, it's important for teaching, it's important for learning. Now we'll try to see how and what ways teachers can make effective use of their language, okay? Question number 3, what is the relationship, if any, between the language used by teachers and the learning which occurs? Is there any relationship? That is to say, is there any how we can use this classroom setting in a pedagogical way to serve the pedagogical purposes and goals of a teacher? Okay, what is the relationship, if any, between the language used by teachers and the learning which occurs? Pedagogical goals, pedagogical achievements. So is there a way to serve this purpose? Okay, to do that. So the first question, the answer is for sure that communication underpins everything that occurs in the classroom setting. Right? Classroom setting. The main aspect of a classroom setting is communication. Okay? So that's one way how classroom discourse is important for teaching and learning. So because the major aspect of a classroom, of teaching, of learning is interaction. You don't find like dancing. They are not dancing, okay, right? They are not doing something else. But the most of the time they are talking. Either the teacher talking or the students talking. Okay, that's it. That's the classroom setting. Of course, there are other things, doing exercises, but it's part of it. It's part of the teaching or for the communicative process in there. Communication is central to teaching. Of course, teachers are asking questions, students are answering questions, the teacher is giving feedback, okay, and so on and so forth. So that's communication, okay? So it's very central point, okay, to teaching. It is central, of course, to learning. Since it's central to teaching, it is, of course, central to learning. So there should be somehow we can use this classroom discourse in some kind of pedagogical way to serve the teaching, to serve the learning processes. It is central to managing groups of people. When you assign groups, when you say do pair work, when you do, okay? So there should be communication. You assign groups, okay? You work in groups. For example, we saw last time that you can ask them questions related to birthday. You can ask them, so ask them questions, okay? You ask them about, you give them numbers orally. So that's part of the classroom management as well. It is central to the learning process, a kind of repetition in there. It is central to organizing the various tasks and activities that make up the classroom practices. So the classroom setting, we have classroom practices, pair work, group work, elicitation, response, feedback, okay, answering, okay, doing a homework, etc. So all those are classroom practices. And language or communication is central to organizing these various tasks. How are you going to do that? You need to use language for that. You need to communicate with students. Okay? So that's why communication is in the classroom setting is so important. So it is, without it there is nothing. Okay? There is no teaching, there is no learning. Why is communication in the classroom setting so important? Same thing again. Communication refers to the ways in which language is used to promote interaction. So because we are talking about teaching a language, ELT, teaching English. And language is communication, right? So how are you going to do that? So you as a teacher, your main area is that you try to promote, okay, the interaction among the students and between you and the students in order to promote this learning of the language, okay? So as Van Leyer, 1996, suggests, the interaction is the most important thing on the curriculum, okay? Curriculum. Not textbook, right? Not methods and approaches, right? Not teaching skills, how to teach writing, not to teach speaking, not how to teach grammar, not how to teach vocabulary. Yes, they are important, but without communication, you can't do that. And without being aware how you can do that, you can't do that effectively, right? So classroom discourse is the main area. But unfortunately, as I told you in the beginning, and as we're going to mention that later, usually, most of the time, if not all of the times, this area is neglected in teacher education programs. I'm sure now you have colleagues who are teaching, and you have been through the NS and CPR, no? Have you been taught this area? No. Discourse, classroom discourse, classroom language, classroom discourse.
We had, it was in 2000, we had to get a subject named Discourse. We just did 2 sessions, and then the teacher shifted to internet.
So that's it, because he didn't know how to deal with that.
It's not there, but I think in CPR there is a course entitled Discourse Analysis.
Is there any focus on classroom language, classroom discourse? Yeah?
We had an introduction to discourse analysis and a small section part of it.
Like the book we have, it's one section, classroom discourse. Yeah. But normally it should be like a major course, okay? But no, I'm not talking just about Morocco, but if you go even to the Cambridge or other specialized places, there is this area missing, okay? They just go through it without much more focus. If we are to become effective as teachers, we need not only to understand classroom communication, we need to understand classroom communication for our teacher education program. We need to understand that, what happens in classroom setting, okay? But we also need to improve it. That is to say, how we can include it in teacher education programs, and how we can propose some tips for teacher trainees to know how to use this classroom discourse effectively, okay, for serving our pedagogical goals, and so on and so forth. Now, that's it for the first question. Question 2, in what ways can teachers make effective use of their language? Effective here means language that promotes learning, that serves our pedagogical goal, okay? Pedagogical achievements, etc. Effective simply means using language that helps rather than hinders the learning process. We have to use language, we have to use classroom discourse in such a way that it can help rather than hinder, hinder, it is obstacle, the learning process. Watch, this is the author of the book I told you. We are using it for our lecture today. What is the relationship, if any, between the language used by teachers and the learning which occurs? What is the relationship? Is there any relationship, pedagogical, between our language and our pedagogical goals, achievements, and what we want to teach our students, and what we want our students to learn? Is there something like that? This is not very clear in the literature. Some say yes, some others say no. But given the fact that this question is raised quite often in the literature, there is always this question raising, okay, which is what is the relationship? Is there any relationship between language used by teachers and the learning which occurs? The fact that it is always raised means that it suggests there is a relationship in there. There is some kind of relationship. What do we mean here by relationship? Again, if there is research which shows that if a teacher uses a classroom discourse in this way, the learning outcomes are better. If the teacher uses classroom discourse in this way, other different way, the learning achievements are lower. This is what we mean by relationship, okay? So there is, some people say yes, some others no, which means that there is still work to be done in there, classroom discourse. But the fact that this issue is raised, this question is raised, the fact that people say this question means that there's something, okay? That's what we can say at this stage. Means or suggests that there is a relationship between classroom language use and learning. So we have to take into account and we have to go further into investigating this area further, okay? Now we move to the next section, which is related to the challenges for teachers and learners, and on the basis of which we try to propose directions for future development in different ways. Challenges, okay, for teachers and learners. There are many, but we just take to deal with some of them. So, first point is that little time is actually spent making language teachers aware of the importance of classroom. This is the point related to what I told you. Teacher education programs, usually they don't focus a lot on this area. They just go through it, okay? Little time, okay? Not much time, not very much focused, okay? Most teacher education programs, either pre or in service, I'm sure that in service you have never done with that. So in service, they pay very little attention to classroom interaction, okay? Teacher education programs offer some kind of subject-based preparation and training in classroom methodology, some kind of, what is classroom discourse, but without linking it to the pedagogy, without linking it to how the new teachers can make better use of their classroom discourse for achieving better goals, pedagogical goals. Now, what is proposed, especially by our author here, Walsh, okay, he proposes that there should be a new kind of model. No, normally this is what we have in so far. There is this model, simple model, which comprises only two strands, okay, used all over the world. These two strands are, of course, methodology, techniques, skills, how to teach the skills, techniques for teaching writing. So it focuses on all these, okay? These are two kinds of strands. But there should be, what this author tries to suggest, there should be a third kind of strand in teacher education programs that deals specifically with interaction in the classroom setting. That is to say, in the education programs, there should be some kind of subjects, course, focusing on this area of classroom setting and how teachers can make better use of it. So that's his new approach, okay? The aim of this new strand, new approach, okay, adding or focusing on this area in teacher education programs, the aim is to sensitize language teachers to the centrality of interaction, to teaching and learning, and provide them with the means of acquiring close understandings of their local context. New student teachers, teacher trainees, they should be given this, okay, and they should help them to learn better about what happens in classroom discourse, in the communication and interaction taking place between teachers and students. What are its features? What are its characteristics? And how teachers can make better use of them. So this is the new third strand that this author tries to provide, okay, to suggest, to be focused on as well in teacher education programs, in addition to the other two strands, which are the methods, the techniques, you know, and all kinds of classroom management, all those kinds of methods and techniques for different areas of teaching and learning. Classroom processes will only improve once teachers have the means of understanding local context and are able to improve it. If you understand it, before you go there, you try to understand it, okay? And how are you going to understand it? You understand it on the basis of the research done so far. And the research done so far, what do? They go to classroom setting, they explore it, they record data, and they try to analyze, and they try to tell you this is what happens. So that's what should be given to this as a new strand, third strand. Okay? And then, therefore, how to improve that classroom setting on the basis of the results of previous research. Classroom interaction lies at the heart of this. Okay, so that's the need to acquire what is called classroom interactional competence. This author is suggesting a new kind of competence. He refers to it as classroom interactional competence. Okay? What does he mean? He gives a definition for this one. Teachers and learners' ability to use interaction as a tool for mediating and assisting learning. Okay? Yes, of course. Thank you. So, because I'm using, okay, I need to, okay. So whenever you notice that you don't see on the screen something, tell me please, okay? So this is what he means by this kind of competence. It is the teachers and learners' ability, and we have to bear in mind the two, the interaction, when we are talking about teachers and students. So there is a kind of knowledge in there. Knowledge related to the learners and knowledge related to the teachers. There is some kind of competence in relation to the two, protagonists, let's call them that way, of using some terms of literature, of classroom setting, right? So understanding and then extending this kind of competence, classroom interactional competence, will boost opportunities for learning. Okay, you see the point? And therefore, enhanced classroom interactional competence results in more learning-oriented interactions. When the teachers are more aware of this kind of competence and how it works and how the learners use language and how the teachers use the language, so they become better at handling this discourse to serve, okay, better learning-oriented interactions, okay? Teachers' use of language and their pedagogical goals must work together. And that's why in my blog post, I told you that I am having a blog, and I'm starting to post new posts written, about which I talk about this kind of language, okay, of teacher, especially for novice, new teachers, okay? Challenges, okay? The use of extended, another way, because you know, we have been talking about this, right? Wait time. This is a kind of aspect related to this classroom interactional competence. And we have said that there is this aspect related to the classroom discourse, but there is one better way of handling it, which is to give better, more extended wait time. Don't be in a hurry, okay? This is one example, okay? Allowing a reasonable time to elapse after asking a question and not interrupting students all the time. Okay? Give time. Don't worry. Don't worry about the silence. Okay? Give it time. And then help them, you know, using other detailed questions or something like that. So, and then not interrupt the students and wait for them to give you the answer. This is an example, okay? Extending learner responses by careful management of the interaction and paraphrasing a learner's utterance. Okay? So you give more time, and then when the learners give you feedback, so you have to extend it and use it in a better way and give them, okay, some opportunities for paraphrasing, using, you know, repair, the idea of repair, which I'm going to talk about at the end of the lecture. Okay? Teachers need to be able to help learners, okay? They need to help learners, and this is one way of helping the learners, as and when needed by scaffolding a contribution. Scaffolding. When we're talking about paraphrasing a learner's utterance, we're talking about scaffolding. Okay, and scaffolding is a major aspect of area of classroom or classroom interactional competence. Okay, which the teacher can better exploit it for better results, learning outcomes. Okay? They can offer a piece or a key piece of vocabulary or introduce a new phrase as needed. Okay? So we're talking about scaffolding, we're talking about paraphrasing learners' responses, etc. And then in our paraphrasing, we try to give new pieces of vocabulary, new phrases as needed. Okay, as needed, not all the time, but as needed. So this is one way which shows, future developments for, incorporating classroom discourse. Okay. The need to change. Another area where classroom discourse can help is this one. Okay. Because when we are going to go to this structure exchange, IRF structure, exchange structure, okay? Usually, and also the other aspects of control, the teachers are control of the discourse. What happens is that the teacher is the ruler of the classroom, okay? He dominates. And we all usually notice that the students are given little time for just giving some feedback. But the teacher talking time is higher using this other terminology, right? Now, what future development could be suggested relying on the classroom discourse or classroom interactional competence is that the need to change the interactional behaviors of learners so that they play a more equal role in classroom discourse. That's why we're talking about helping the students or the teacher talking time being lower and the student talking time being higher. Okay? In most content-based subjects, because when we are talking about classroom discourse, we have to be careful because there are two branches for that. There is classroom discourse, which investigates subjects or content-based subjects like teaching history, teaching geography, teaching whatever kind of subject using a language. So there is classroom discourse there as well. And there is the classroom discourse related to language education in particular, when we're talking about ELT, for instance. Okay? So in most content-based subject, learners answer questions. So this included ELT, of course, and in language education classroom. Learners answer questions respond to cues, follow the teacher's initiative, avoid interrupting. Right? This is what happens, right? But this kind of future development that tries to base itself on this classroom interactional competence suggests something else. In language classrooms, we need learners, because we are talking about teaching a language, learning a language, we need to have something different, which is that the learners should need to both ask and answer questions. You should give them more freedom, okay? To interrupt where appropriate, to take the initiative, to seize the floor, to hold a turn, etc. And this is part of this kind of stress-free environment you as a teacher should promote, okay? So this is the new direction, okay? Future development, okay? For better use of classroom discourse to serve the pedagogical roles of teaching and learning. So we need to allow, okay, our students to ask questions and to answer questions, of course, that go without saying, and, okay, to interrupt, to take the initiative, to seize the floor, and to hold a turn, okay? Because then, you know, they have their own thinking and their own, so they have to allow it in. Allow that in. Because what happens is usually that we frustrate the teachers, or not the teacher, the students, we frustrate the teachers' initiatives. That's done by some areas, but we also as teachers, frustrate the students' initiatives, okay? Teachers need to encourage interaction that have a more jagged profile, where learners play a more central role in constructing meanings. You have to allow them in, okay? You have to allow them in via asking questions and so on, interrupting, taking initiative, seizing the floor, holding a turn, and so forth. So don't worry about the students' noise, okay? Of course, acceptable noise. Noise between quotes, okay? Yeah. Where learners ensure that there are opportunities for negotiation and clarification. So when you give them this floor, so there are opportunities that you can raise, which can serve you in the scaffolding process. Okay, so now we go and talk about. So these are the to show you the rationale of the whole story of dealing with this classroom setting and how it can serve, okay, better the teaching and learning processes. Now we go and try to explore, okay, what is this classroom setting, what are its main characteristics, features, etc. One of the main characteristics of classroom discourse is the idea of control of the interaction, okay. Okay. So, okay, one of the most striking characteristics of classroom talk or classroom discourse, all levels, okay, now we're talking about all levels, different ages, mono, multilingual, all types of classroom settings, right? Okay, from primary to university, beginner to upper intermediate or advanced, different ages, teenagers, children, adults, different types of classrooms interrelated to culture, others, okay. Is that the roles of the participants, teachers, and learners are not equal, they are asymmetrical. Okay? The roles, there is some, they are not equal, not like this. There is usually the teacher and then the students, okay? It's asymmetrical. The teacher's party is in a position of a power or an authority, okay? So the teacher is always the ruler of the classroom setting. He's the one to manage. He's the one to give orders. He's the one to dominate. The talking time, and so on and so forth. He's the authority. They have control of the patterns of communication that occur and is able to direct and manage the interaction. And when we're going to go to have a look at this structure, classroom discourse exchange structure, which is the initiation, response, feedback, in fact, it serves this main aspect, this main role of a teacher to dominate, the authority, the power, okay? He's the one to control the patterns of communication. He is the one to allow the student to say something, and he is the one to allow students to answer or not to allow them, and so on and so forth. They are able to direct and manage interaction. So this is a major aspect, characteristic of classroom discourse. They control patterns of communication by managing both the topic of conversation and turn taking. Usually, it's the teacher who is initiating the topic. Usually, okay, if not all of the time. Not students. Rarely that you can see teachers allowing students to suggest titles and then talking about those topics later on. Usually, the teacher, he is the one to suggest, to manage the topic of the conversation, and also to manage the turn taking. Turn taking, okay? Turn taking, to give in turns. Students, however, typically take their cues from the teacher through whom they direct most of their response. Now, the teacher, he is the one to manage the interactional pattern. And the students, they are what we can say as, they are submissive. Okay, they follow that pattern that is given to them to the teacher. They are submissive, okay, so they typically take the cues from the teacher, and then they follow that, okay, they go and then give responses on the basis of what the teacher as an authority, as a power gives them, right? Even in the most decentralized and learner-centered classroom, teachers decide who speaks when, to whom, and for how long. Even if you have some cases of teachers, allowing students to talk and take initiative, etc., but still, in fact, it should remain that way. It should remain somehow that way. You should keep that power. You should keep that authority. You should keep that control of the interaction and pattern. Okay. So what happens is that even if you have this kind of decentralized and learner-centered classroom, teachers decide. Usually, they are the ones to decide and who speaks, who, when, and whom, and how long. Okay. But what we're going to suggest in this regard is that not that we just forget about the teacher's authority, power, okay? No, we should keep it, but we should be kind of balanced in such a way that we don't discriminate the students' initiative and increasing the students' talking time and suggesting topics and so on and so forth. Yes, please.
I asked my classes, my back classes, whether they would prefer, if they have the two choices, whether they would prefer the presence of the teacher in learning, or they would prefer learning without a teacher, via technology and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And only one or two in the classes who chose the second choice. All of
the others
chose
teacher.
Even then, the students themselves cannot do that.
Yes, for sure. That's normal. That goes without saying. But what happens is that what happens in reality is that it is over-exaggerated. I'm not going to say it's exaggerated, but I would say it's over-exaggerated, the teacher's monopoly of this power, authority. Okay, I think you agree with me, right? Okay? Yes, please, Zakaria.
No, I agree with you in what you have said. But the question that can be raised is that how especially for classes in which they have to follow certain curriculum, like the pedagogical classes, how are the students supposed to initiate topics for learning, whereas they are already set by the curriculum? And sometimes you don't have to go beyond those, although there is a margin of maneuver, you have to follow that curriculum because actually that's what they are going to find in the standardized exam.
Yes, and that's again.
You're bound.
Yes, they are bound. That's the and again. Yes.
I think this will simple for teacher and students related to the main issue of the. I said this. There is a margin of maneuver. Okay.
That's the margin.
It's very limited.
Yes.
Very limited.
Now the teachers maybe need somehow to boost it a little bit more, because again, you can't allow the students, and you know we are teaching very young students. You can't allow them to suggest all the topics and the topics of the curriculum, because you, as a mature, as an expert, and as a ministry, as a government, as a nation, and you know about the developments of things, okay, in the world, and what can serve better the purposes of the nation and the students. You are the one in authority to suggest the main topics. But then what we could do as teachers is to increase this margin of, as you call it, of maneuver. This area, you need to increase it a little bit further. There are ways you can do it. Okay, so you can, from time to time, small discussion. It should be 1 hour discussion. From time to time, allow students to talk about it. This is for the classroom sitting itself, official hours. But then there is the other area of clubs, which is much better area for developing. There are always ways how you can increase this margin of maneuver for allowing the students to talk and to take initiative, to suggest topics and to do things that they think of as, okay, yes?
For example, when teaching those topics themselves, we can relate them to the students' personal.
Yes, that's another way, yeah. Yes. How do you think this is related to you? Do you think it's good? There are ways how you can personalize the topics. Yes, okay. And also this is related to classroom questions. When we're talking about classroom questions, you can raise a discussion, okay, on the basis of that. So teacher's role, yes, you should keep that authority power, but then you should, make some kind of balance. So where we can, yes,
They
yes.
say that power can be shared with the teacher and whereas authority is the teacher. It's actually
Yes, that's another better way of putting it. Yes, better way of putting it. Authority should be there always for the authority for the teacher, but then power, you can empower the students. In other words, sharing, okay, allowing students to take power, to have power. Okay, so then, as Breen puts it, it is the teacher who orchestrates the interaction. So you need to have to do that. So. The classroom data clearly shows how teachers control the interaction. I don't know if I put it for you. Yes, I put some example which shows how the teachers orchestrate. I like this term, the classroom discourse. Yes. Okay, so you have there teacher. So this is data collected, recorded from the classroom. And then you have teacher, learner. T stands for teacher, and L stands for learner, right? So you can have learner 1, you can have learner 2, and so on, depending on who is taking. So, okay, Erika, could you explain? Okay, read this on your own, better. Of course, I can't zoom it this way, but it's too small for you to look? Too small. Okay. What I can do in this case is this. Okay. Is it okay now? Yes. Good. You allow me to edit this as well. Okay. And maybe this one should be okay. Okay, here you go. Okay, example, please. And we discuss it. It's also taken from the same book I told you, where I'm using for this lecture. Okay? So what do you notice about this kind of interaction here? What could you notice about this idea of control, of controlling the interaction? Yes?
Teacher is not guiding the discussion.
Yes, he is guiding the discussion, and also he is suggesting, yes, encourage, and also directing the discussion towards some point. Okay? He also from the very beginning does suggests the topic, right? Okay, Erika, could you explain something about law and order in Japan? So he's the one to take the, okay?
You can see it in the last sentence of the teacher, so he directs it into Brazil. So he asked first about
Japan, and then, yeah, direction.
trying
So,
to make comparison between
yes, it's not the students who are doing that, right? The students are not directing, instead of talking about Japan, they start talking about Brazil or another country. It's the students who, the teacher who is giving them that permission. Yes, now you can go and talk about, okay? So he's directing, guiding, suggesting topics. Somebody was raising
Also, what teacher there doesn't care much about like correcting teacher errors, mistakes, but he cares about how
Info.
the conversation, communication process, and
Yes.
goes on.
Yes, fluency. Okay, he wants the communication to take place, to go on, to proceed, etc. And this is one way for H. Madani, who is going to do classroom discourse. So this is how analysis of classroom discourse takes place, right? You take data, and then you try to analyze the data like we are doing right now. So teachers clearly talk more and occupy more of the interactional space of the classroom. This is also applicable. Learners' opportunity to contribute are largely controlled by the teacher. And finally, this three-part discourse structure comprising a teacher question, learner response, and teacher feedback is another feature of classroom discourse that we'll talk about later on, which is the initiation, feedback, response. We will talk about it later, exchange structure. Yes?
I think when the teacher, for example, here directs conversation with also in national language, it doesn't do objective of himself. It doesn't look like
Yes, of course.
If it is about this understanding structure or some vocabulary item, it tends to guide students.
Yes, to that area, to that zone.
Yes.
And here we're talking about scaffolding, zone of proximal development somehow, okay? So you are, yeah.
Yes, but it's just a specific example. The focus is on fluency.
Mm-hmm.
So the
Yes.
teacher allows students to
Without paying too much attention to errors or correcting errors. Yes, yes. So that's all applicable. So that's for one main characteristic of classroom discourse. Now we turn on to another area, feature of classroom discourse, which is referred to as speech modification. And we remember in the beginning of this lecture, I refer to that example of parents talking to their babies and children, okay? And then using, I'm remembering some exchanges with my daughter, so that's why. So parents talking with their children. My little daughter, when she wants to say حلو, شي حاجة, she says and then when my son comes back from school with Sidi Ali, small bottle of Sidi Ali, it's empty, and she takes it from him and then comes to me, things like that. So yes. Another example is tuf. Tuf, it stands for shuf. Shuf, tuf, tuf. And okay, so and the same thing for the parents, of course. So when we are talking to them, we tend to go into this direction of simplifying our language. And this is, as I told you, is referred to in the literature foreigner talk. Okay. Now the teachers do the same thing. Yes? Is it the same as? Yeah. It's same. Yeah. Foreigner talk. It's simplified discourse of parents. Yeah. And as I'm saying, the same thing is applicable for teachers, who are teaching a new language to students. So of course you need to modify, simplify, etc. So one of the defining characteristics of classroom discourse is teachers' modification, simplification, etc. of their spoken language. Teachers' use of a more restricted code, avoiding complex vocabulary, complex grammatical structures. This is what is called as kind of more restricted code. A teacher's speech is slower, louder, more deliberate. You understand this issue? The point, more deliberate. You are not being yourself. You are not being yourself when you are teaching, when you are speaking, I'm talking about especially some cases we have. You shouldn't be like yourself. You should have that feeling, When you are doing it, you have this feeling that you are not like yourself. You are not using this kind of, you are being somebody different somehow.
Not like spontaneous.
Yeah, you are not spontaneous, right. It becomes a habit. And that's the point.
Once you go into classroom, you need to talk slow.
Yes, that's normal. That's normal, and I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to refer to it, and that's why I'm raising this awareness. Because usually what happens is that when, especially for new teachers, when they are trying to modify their speech, they feel that they are not themselves, so they go back to themselves and then forget about it. So you have to take it that way, like you are talking to children. And I think all brothers and sisters, if you don't have children, but you have brothers, you have sisters, who have nieces, nephews, whatever, who are very young, and you start doing that. So it's the same kind of thing. So lower, slower, louder, more deliberate, and makes a greater use of pausing and emphasis.
Maybe on articulation.
Yes, articulation, pronunciation. Also sometimes, you noticed the video we showed you last time when he was talking about introducing this third person singular? Cats. He was saying cats. Even in his gestures, he was being emphatic. In pronunciation, he was emphatic. In his articulation, facial, he was being emphatic. And even his hands, gestures, he was being emphatic, showing them cats. He was doing like this. So that's kind of kind of speech modification we are talking about. Teachers also make a great deal of use of gestures and facial expressions to help conveying meaning. So part of this modification. You are slower, louder, etc. And also trying to use more gestures, more facial expressions to convey meaning. Of course, in addition to pictures, photographs, videos, ICT, whatever. Right? Now, this is what happens normally in classroom discourse. But the purpose of studying classroom discourse is to see how we can focalize this, make it better. The modification strategies used by teachers are not accidental. They are not accidental. They are conscious and deliberate and occur for a number of reasons. So, base reason is clarity, learning to be better, and so on. Learners must understand what a teacher is saying if they are going to learn. So if you want them to understand, so you need to help them to learn, you need them to help understand, okay? And one way of helping them understand is to modify your speech, okay? It is highly unlikely that learners will progress if they do not understand their teacher. Learning is hindered if your students don't understand you, if you are talking faster, if you are using complex vocabulary, if you are not being slow, if you don't use pauses, if you don't use markers, cues and so on, okay? You are not being emphatic, if you don't use facial expressions, if you don't use gestures. So you don't help them understand. Of course, if they don't understand, for sure they will not learn. And remember last time when some of you were teaching complaint, one of the main things you should have started with is to explain what is mean of complaining, okay? Before going into the characteristics of complaining, expressions for complaining, functions. Most of the time, teachers model language for their students. So that is to say, you give them the model that they can use. Your model, because you are proficient, you know English better, your model is something else, okay? But then for the students, you should have some better, simplified model, okay, that you should present for your students. And here I refer you to the blog post written classroom language or classroom English, okay? They use appropriate pronunciation, intonation, sentence, and word stress, and so on, in order to give learners an opportunity to hear the sounds of the target language. Okay? You should, lower the level so much. A teacher's articulation of second foreign language may be the only exposure to the language that the learners actually receive. Another difficulty we're having, especially in relation to ELT in Morocco, is that you know that we are basically a francophone country. Not francophone country. I don't know how to say it, but we are that. We are francophone. So what happens is that the only exposure we have, apart from dialect or Arabic, Amazigh, to a foreign language, is French, in media, in books, in advertising, in publicity. We have on the streets, the buses, TV. It's, French. So which means that exposure to English is very rare. Okay? So therefore, the only model for students to have about English is the teacher. Okay? Yes, movies now. We have NBC thanks to satellite channels. Okay?
Academic English is from the teachers.
Yes, please.
I mean, for such an academic English, it's from the teacher.
Yeah. So therefore, the teacher should do his best in order to simplify this model for the students. Therefore, it is modeled. You should be careful that this model is modeled correctly, appropriately for your students. Is it okay? There is so much happening at any moment in a classroom that teachers need to ensure that the class is following. So another thing you have to be careful about is that you need to be careful about how the flow of communication is taking place in the classroom setting. So you should help this flow to continue. And how are you going to help this flow to continue? Is to help your students understand you. And how are you going to help your students understand you? By simplifying your language. So this kind of cycle should be going on throughout the classroom discourse. Simplification, understanding, learning objectives. Simplification, learning, understanding, learning objectives. Okay? And how? By the speech modification. That everyone understands and learners don't get lost in the rapid flow of discourse. There is the need for learners to navigate the discourse, and the fact that many learners do actually get lost from time to time. It happens, okay? Usually students are lost, okay? And therefore, you have to go back to this cycle again: simplification, understanding, learning, okay? And it's very sensitive area. It is teachers' responsibility to ensure that this does not happen by making frequent use of, okay, repetition. Okay, so you have to do repetition, but you have to do it, okay, correctly. By echoing an individual's learner's contribution for the benefit of the whole, okay, class. Okay, so that's why last time again we did this repetition and how we can do repetition in the classroom. Okay, it's one way of simplifying. Okay. Now, teachers, they use different strategies for linguistic resources to modify their classroom discourse and to facilitate comprehension and assist the learning process. So there are different strategies, so we have to mention them, okay, lower, pause, etc. The use of simplified vocabulary is another thing. Use of simplified vocabulary. The absence of more idiomatic or regional variations. Idioms or regional variations. For in our cases, it's not very much applicable because we learn standard English with teachers, so not very much. But people teaching in like in the United States, TESOL and so on, it's applicable. Grammar too is frequently simplified. The grammar is simplified through the use of simpler and shorter utterances. Subject, verb, complement, simple clauses, not complex clauses, okay, and shorter utterances, not long discourse, not long sentences, okay. And one of the ways that can help you in this regard is what is referred to as classroom English, okay. Classroom, this is also, there are books about this, okay. There are books written about this kind of classroom English, okay? And of course, you know, the classroom setting, we have different objectives, different functions. Sometimes we open the book, start a lesson, classroom management, you know, and there is language specific to each type of, okay, function. The use of a more limited range of tenses and fewer modal verbs. Limited range of tenses. Don't go to past perfect, you know, present perfect, simple present, past simple, past continuous. And modal verbs should be avoided as much as possible. Pronunciation is also often clearer and slower articulations and wider use of standard forms. Standard English. There's no problem about that for us because we learned standard English. Slower articulation. So clearer and slower articulation. Wider use of standard forms we should avoid, and for us it's not a problem. Teachers may ask themselves if they are losing something of their identity coming to this issue by making all these changes, because we are not being ourselves. We are being somebody different. Okay? So this is why, especially for new teachers, they ask this question if they are losing their identity. That happens. But then by the time, of course, it becomes part of and you know that you are doing this for teaching. Yeah, you are doing it for teaching, so it doesn't hurt anything about my level or anything else. This does not happen to any great extent. It doesn't really happen. You are not losing your identity. You are just doing it for a limited amount of time. So you are not losing your identity. Your identity is there, and then it will come back to you. You will come back to it after you finish your responsibility. They simply use a classroom, what is referred to as a kind of classroom idiolect. You know the story of idiolect? So they use this kind of, it's classroom idiolect. And we know that whenever we go to some, talking to the idea, coming back to the idea of register, configuration. So if you go to the doctor, you have a kind of dialect. If you are speaking to your family, it's one idiolect. If you're speaking to your wife or husband, it's an idiolect. If you are speaking to, So. And therefore, if you are a teacher, you have a classroom ideolect that you resort to for some time, and then you will come back to yourself later. An individual way of talking that is normally based on their personal conversational style. Okay, Classroom ideolect, so Walsh 2006. Teachers modify their interactional resources to assist, okay, comprehension and help learners navigate, okay, the discourse. So we're talking about this cycle. We're coming back to this cycle. We want our students to learn. What should we do? We should help them to understand. And if we want to help them understand, to assist comprehension and help learners navigate the discourse. And if we don't do that, we have to simplify our discourse. Classroom ideolect. The use of transition markers, their use of transition markers, so to signal, okay, they use transition markers, okay, another way how you can simplify your discourse again, how you can modify discourse in order to help them understand. So teachers modify, etc. They use transition markers. You notice this about me and many teachers. Each teacher has got his own markers. Okay, to signal the beginnings and endings of various activities and stages in a lesson. Because you should help them understand the vocabulary, the language, but also you should help them the discourse, understand the discourse, where you are, what stage you are. So you should help them about that, direct them about that. And they use discourse markers like right, okay, now, so, all right, okay, like I'm doing now, okay. They perform a very important function in signaling changes in the interaction or organization of learning. Now we turn to, okay. Now, speech modification. Transition or discourse markers enables teachers to guide learners through the discourse, okay? They help hold their attention. They help announce a change in activity. They signal the beginning or end of a lesson stage. So we're talking here about discourse. In a paragraph, written discourse, it has got its own ways of signaling these changes, etc. Okay, but in oral discourse we have markers. Globally, they help a class stay together and work in harmony. Okay, that's the benefit of these discourse markers that also help modify teachers' speech, right? Teachers use more subtle strategies so as to clarify, check, or confirm meanings. This is another area as part of the discourse, but also helps keep this harmony, keep the flow of interaction, communication go on. So they clarify, check, or confirm meanings, such as confirmation checks, which help teachers make sure they understand learners. You check, okay, do you understand? Comprehension checks, which ensure that learners understand the teacher. You have confirmation checks there, and then you have comprehension checks. You have repetition, and you have clarification request, asking students for clarification. Reformulation, rephrasing learner's utterance. Okay? So all this is part of this subtle strategies to clarify, check, confirm meanings. So this is also another aspect of modification of classroom discourse. Turn completion, finishing a learner's contribution. Okay. And finally, backtracking, returning to an earlier part of a dialogue. So all this is part of the discourse, because we are talking about discourse, right? And discourse is this. Discourse, we have the language, but apart from the language, the simplified vocabulary, the simplified tenses, etc., we also have the markers, we have these techniques, strategies for clarifying, checking, and confirming meanings. These strategies operate at the level of interaction rather than solo performance, because we are talking about interaction. There is discourse going on, so we have these strategies. When we have learner or a teacher alone, like I'm doing now, lecturing, giving information, so there isn't much. There are discourse markers, yes, but we don't have other things like checking, like they are used to ensure the discourse flows well and that the complex relationship between language use and learning is maintained. Language use, the discourse, and learning, they both go together. Teachers often resort to filling the gaps and smoothing over learner contributions as a means of maintaining the flow of a lesson. Filling the gaps, okay, if there are any gaps. Smoothing over learner contributions, like facilitating the learner's contributions. You should help about eliciting, getting things from students, okay? And all this plays a role in maintaining the flow of a lesson, or in order to create flawless, discourse. Nobody's distracted, okay? So instead, by getting learners to reiterate their contributions, by paraphrasing and extending learner contributions, by shaping what learners say, teachers are greatly helping learners' language development. So the purpose of all of this is this final statement here, which is that they greatly help learners' language development. Remember this cycle, okay? Cycle. Example. Do you see it? I think it's going to be difficult to make it bigger, because the problem with this is that it's one image like that, and this too long sentence, it should have been cut. I read it for you then, right? I read it for you. So, teacher, yes. So tell me again what you mean by that. Learner, the first is the introduction. The second, in this case, we have the three. Who you are, to introduce yourself, a few words about yourself, and where you live, and what I do, and teacher. So, yes, learner. And then, it's the problem. What happened? Teacher, yes, learner. And you need to explain it, and why you are writing, because probably you did something like you gave the information to the police, but it didn't happen. Teacher, so can I ask you, why did you write it in your head as you said? Learner, I don't know, it's like a rule. Teacher, right, so let's like a rule. It's like a rule, what do you mean? So the purpose of this kind of extract is just to show you about and I want you to focus just on the teacher here, because we're talking about teacher modification. Okay? So the teacher's terms. Yes, so tell me again, what you mean by that? Shorter, simpler vocabulary, no complex tenses, no models. No, look at the other term. So, yes. Look at the other term then. Yes. Discourse markers. Yes, right, etc. So can I ask you, why did you write it in your head, as you said? It's again, very clear language. Use the simple past. Right, so it's like a rule. What do you mean? So it's very simple, okay? Vocabulary, okay? Speech modification. And then we're going to stop here for a moment, okay? Okay, I don't know if you have a class with Mrs. Benodi. Okay. And then next class we're going to lecture. We're going to yes, to talk about elicitation technique.